Comparing an 8% retirement withdrawal strategy to a 4% withdrawal strategy. All right, so my 8% isn't the same as like Dave Ramsey's, which he says take, I mean, at least the videos I've seen, and it's been a couple years ago, so I watched, he might have changed it since. He's taking 8% a year and adjusting with inflation. That's crazy. Don't do that. We're not doing that here. What we're doing here is we're saying we're going to take the 8% of the previous year's balance. All right, so whatever the previous year's balance times 8%, that's what we're taking out. So in this case, we got $1 million portfolio. We're taking $80,000 out. The portfolio goes to $2 million. We're taking $160,000 out. The portfolio goes to $500,000. We're taking $40,000. So I mean, the likelihood of it going to a $2 million or $500,000 in any given year not very high. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. So just 8% of the previous year's balance. We're going to compare that to the 4% rule, which just adjusts with inflation each and every year. All right. And this is from a chapter of my book, which I'm actually taking out. I'm eliminating this chapter, but it was pretty good. I spent a lot of time on creating this, but it just doesn't flow the way I want to. So I want to do a video. I'll probably do a blog post on it. So comparing 8% to 4% rules, we're going to come over here. And what you'll see here is, all right, so here's S&P 5. It's all in the S&P 500, by the way. S&P 500, we're putting 8% in the previous, taking 8% of the previous year's balance, starting in 1931 to 1960, a 30-year retirement, in 1966 to 1995. Why do I do that? Because those two scenarios are among the worst 30-year timeframes in histoire. In 1931, the S&P 500 was down 44.2. In 1932 and 33, it was down another 9.9 and 5.1. All right. The saving grace, I guess, is that we had massive deflation. Deflation was 9%, negative 9% in 1931, 9.9 in 1932, and negative 5.1 in 1933. So I say, in some respects, deflation softened the blow from the massive market declines in the 1930s. But even with those massive market declines, here's 1931 and 1960. So our $1 million portfolio got skunked. We're way down here now, 44%. And we took 8% of that 44% decline of the portfolio out. But you can see it starts going up. Then we had a couple years down here. Right? So we had another bad year. Starts going up. And that's 1937. Had a bad year in 1937. So 1938, we took out less. And you can see down here, back to $40,000. But then from the right here, I think it was 1942 or something like that. I don't know why I don't have a year here. I should have. But anyway, you can see rates started going back up. And so the time we die in 1960, after 30 years, now we're taking out $130,000 a year. Again, we started with about $45,000, and now we're taking $100,000. We didn't run out of money, by the way. You know, we had some volatility there for sure. Absolutely. But either way, you survived the worst bear markets in American history, not factoring in inflation. However, if you retired in 1966, you retired at the start of the greatest inflation America has ever experienced over the next 15 years. Never in American history have we had the kind of inflation like we did. Inflation averaged 6.9% a year over the next 15 years, and the S&P 500 only averaged 7.46. So basically, we had 50 basis points above the rate of inflation with just the S&P 500 alone. All right, but again, look, you can see right here, this is the red. We're up here. We're taking 8% again. You see right there. We're taking out more than we get skunked a little bit. We get massive skunk, 73 and 74 right there. So now we're taking $40,000. Like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? But then it grew back up again. By the way, what caused the mass inflation? It was government printing. No, it's stupid, I'll tell you. From this book right here, You Had a Job for Life. And he says, it's a mill town in New Hampshire. He says, by January 1974, oil prices had quadrupled. The era of cheap energy, one of the cornerstones of post-war American boom and prosperity, had expired. Skyrocketing and the unpredictable energy prices would torment the energy-intensive mills for the remainder of its existence. Yeah, that's sad, dude. Fuel costs would play a major role in the demise of the mill. In its final decades, the mill would convert from oil to wood chips, back to oil, and then to natural gas in a vain attempt to secure a stable, low-cost supply of energy to keep itself running. And then it went kaput. Cheap energy, that's what makes, expensive energy is what causes inflation. Government printing, a little bit on the perimeter. It's energy, dude. It's just all there is to it. So it drives me up the wall. All right. So anyway, so here we go in 1966 and 1995. You still did not run out of money, even with the 8% rule, if that makes sense. But check this out. It gets even better. We compare the 8% rule in red with the 4% rule in blue, and this is in 1931 to 1960. Again, the worst market declines we've ever seen, not including inflation. You can see right here, yeah, we're getting smoked here. We're down to what, 50-something thousand or 48,000 bucks. Here's a 4% rule, taking 4% a year. And you notice the 4% rule is dropping because of deflation. But look what happened in 1960. The 4% rule, we're only right here. I don't even know what that is. Again, we're not using this in the thing, my book. So what was that? 65,000 bucks. I think I actually say in here. Let's take a look. What I say. No, I don't. But anyway, you can see right here. That's 65,000 bucks or something like that. Here's our 8% rule, giving us what, almost 3 times that, or 2 times that, 2.5 times. Look at that. The only time we ever even came close was right there in 1941, and then in that post-World War II with the higher inflation. That's it. So then we go right here. You can see. Keep in mind that by the last year of retirement in we're going down here. Yeah, right here. All right, here's withdrawals in 1966 to 1995. All right, again, the high inflation times. You can see our 4% rule did better right there in 1974, but it took 9 years for it to do better, and then it did better for the rest of the time. So the S&P 500 8% rule was underperforming relative to the 4% rule in 1966 and 1995. However, in the 1931, with low inflation, in fact, deflation initially, we did much better than the 4% rule. Oh, but it's going to get better. Check this out. Remember, these were 2 of the worst retirement scenarios over the last 100 years. Let's add a third bad scenario just to further the point that you retired in 1969. Let's see. So in 1969, the 8% rule beat the 4% rule again until about 1973. 74 actually. Then the 4% rule beat us with a spit distance. But then right there, the latter part of the 1990s, we destroyed the 4% rule because we had markets that were going up. Isn't that interesting? Again, that's the worst. These are the 3 worst times to retire. 1969, 1966, 1931. Isn't that crazy? And yet the 8% rule did better than 2 of the 4% rule, 2 of 3 of the 4% rules. Now, there was some time in there we did worse. Oh, but it's going to get even better. Check this out. As you can see, the worst time frames, the 4% rule outperformed the 8% rule just out of one of the 3 worst time frames. But this happened rarely. In fact, look historically, you'll see that all the times the 8% rule outperformed the 4. We're going to go 1900 and 1929. Look at this. The 4% rules in blue, the good guys, 8% rules in red. And again, this is just all the S&P 500. So again, the 8% rule is not adjusting for inflation, just taking 8% of the previous year's balance. 4% rule is adjusting with inflation. Here's the massive World War I that snake Woodrow Wilson lied us into right here. But again, even after that, we still smoked them. Look at that. Look at all the money we spent compared to the 4% rule. That's 1920, 1929, 1910 to 1939. But look at this. It's, within spit distance of each other. We were better, they were better, we were better, they were better, we were better. You see what I'm saying? So pretty close. 1920 to 1949. The 4% rule never came close to what we did. And that's to include this massive decline because of the Great Depression. 1930, 1959. Again, this is the big, essentially the outset of the Great Depression. Even the 4% rule never came close. I mean, a couple times there, a couple times there. That's it. 1940 to 1969. Never. We smoked the 4% rule. 1950 to 1979. Smoked the 4% rule. 1960 to 1989. We were better in the first 15 years. 4% rule is better than the last 15 years. All right. Well, that's, are we going to survive those extra 15 years? I don't know. 1970 to 1999. Again, this is with the last, look at that. We're basically right hand in hand until right there, and then we smoked them. 1980 to 2009, we smoked them. 1990 to 2019, we smoked them. 2000 to 2023, and it's about, it looks like the 4% rule did a little bit better than us. But anyway, I ran these numbers every single year for 30 years. So 19 to 1901, 1900 to 1929, 1901 to 1930. 1902 to 1931, and the 8% rule just smoked the 4% rule the vast majority of time. Now, the drawback is the volatility of income, and that's what we talk about in my book and actually the next chapter. So stay tuned because this is a good book. You're going to want it, and you're going to want to send me a cup of coffee in the link down in the show notes. Doobly-doo. All right, God bless. We'll see you.